That's your lymphatic system talking. And most of what wellness culture tells you to do about it is either useless or completely backwards. The second key characteristic that I feel like most people get wrong is that the lymphatic system is... You know that puffy, heavy, sluggish feeling you get sometimes in the morning, sometimes after a salty night or a night at happy hour with your friends, or even on your period? That's your lymphatic system talking. And most of what wellness culture tells you to do about it is either useless or completely backwards. Welcome back to Wellness Fixes the Pod. I'm your host, Dr. Kelsy Vick, a board-certified orthopedic doctor of physical therapy and a pelvic floor physical therapist. And you've heard of spring cleaning for your house as a way to clear out clothes, refresh, organize. But have you heard of spring cleaning for your body? This April, we're running through a spring cleaning series, but a fun, wellnessy, healthy body style of spring cleaning, not your typical home organization, clear out sort of spring cleaning. And we're going to start off with an often misunderstood system in our bodies, the lymphatic system. Many of us probably think about the lymphatic system when it comes to something like gua sha or dry brushing, but the lymphatic system is so much more than that. So I figured what better way to kick off our spring cleaning series than by talking about this often misunderstood system in our bodies. Our lymphatic system, or the body's natural waste clearance system, is in charge of how well your body fights off illness, how well it maintains fluid balance, and how puffy and swollen you feel. So a little smart girl science moment. If you care about the different components of the lymphatic system, sometimes I know I understand my body better by understanding how it actually works in the deeper why. So this is that little smart girl science moment for those of you guys who are like me and need the deeper understanding of the system before we can apply it to our day-to-day lives. The main components of your lymphatic system are the actual lymph fluid, which is created from excess fluid that is left over from a lot of different processes within your body, in addition to some of the waste components that are also a part of a lot of different processes in our body. A lot of the byproducts from things like gas exchange, different cellular processes. So all of that goes into your lymph. That's the actual fluid of the lymphatic system. The second component are the lymphatic vessels, and these are the actual pathways that carry that lymph fluid. Then you've got the lymph nodes, and you can think of these as little checkpoints along the way. They check for foreign pathogens and invaders and help our body break them down to eventually get rid of them. They also tell the rest of the team if they sense an invader to queue up the response needed to eventually get rid of that invader. If it is too much for them to break down or handle, they are in charge of queuing the key players in the system that will eventually get rid of those pathogens and foreign invaders. And lastly, you've got the lymphatic organs. And I think of these like college. They are the preparatory institutions that help to mature and weed out certain immunity cells that are going to eventually fight for our immune function. They make sure that you have the best immune cells working on your behalf. So this lymphatic system is actually an extremely particular system, and there are a few key characteristics that most people get wrong that I want to make sure you actually get right. One cool fact is that lymph vessels actually run throughout your entire body, not just in your legs or your hands or where you might feel those tight rings or on a plane where your legs get swollen. They actually run all throughout the body. And you can actually feel your lymph nodes. Most of us can feel them in our armpits or our groin. Some people might be able to feel them on the front of their lower leg. They are those sort of checkpoints that help us to detect foreign invaders, break them down to eventually get rid of them. So we can feel those clusters of lymph nodes. Most often, people can feel them in their groin or their armpits. The second key characteristic that I feel like most people get wrong is that the lymphatic system is what we call a low pressure system. Unlike the cardiovascular system that has the heart as a pump, the lymphatic system does not have a pump. So a lot of our lymphatic system is working against gravity. That's why when you're on a plane, you might experience a lot of pooling and swelling in your lower legs. It's because that system is a pretty low pressure system. There's no pump that's helping to return that fluid back up to the heart. So a lot of our lymphatic system is actually having to work against gravity. This is why compression stockings actually help during the flight. It's because they provide this boundary for our lymphatic system to work against to get that fluid moving back up against gravity. If you don't have those compression stockings, you can just picture your lower legs swelling and swelling and swelling because it is a low pressure system. So that fluid is going to pool there. It's also a low pressure environment being in the air. So those compression stockings add sort of this boundary for the lymphatic system to press against to hopefully help return that lymphatic fluid back up the system and work against gravity. The third characteristic that a lot of people get wrong, this is the one I see most people getting wrong, is that the lymphatic system lies very close to the surface of the skin. So you don't need a lot of manual pressure to actually affect your lymphatic system. The fourth characteristic of our lymphatic system that might be the second most thing people get wrong, if not the first, like these are tied for 1 and 2. In order to affect our lymphatic system, let's say in our feet, we need to clear up the areas ahead of the feet before we're able to actually successfully and efficiently move that swelling from the feet back up that pathway. Since it is a low pressure system, it's not like if we move things from our feet, it's going to push that fluid through the lymph nodes, through the rest of our body. We actually have to clear the areas above or further up the chain or down the chain if we're talking about our face, head, and neck area before we clear the more distal or the further away areas from our trunk. So this means we need to clear those checkpoint areas, those lymph nodes, closer into the trunk before we can work on that puffiness, that swelling further away from the trunk. And lastly, if we have damage to our lymphatic systems, we can end up with that puffy feeling, that swelling, and decreased immunity, since it is involved in your immune function. A little story time. My sister and her fiance recently went to get their first lymphatic massages. And I called them after and I was like, how did it go? I was very curious, knowing what we know now about the lymphatic system, how their lymphatic massages actually went and what was performed and what was done and the processes involved. Now that you understand the lymphatic system a little bit better, you can start to do a little bit more of a dive into how other people treat the lymphatic system. So I was asking her, how did it go? And she was like, honestly, it felt like they were doing nothing. I don't know what we paid for. My fiance was a little upset because he was like, what the heck was that? It feels like we got nothing done. And in my little nerdy heart, I was like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Because A, we know the lymphatic system lies very close to the skin. So B, we know that light pressure is needed. And I didn't get a chance to ask her the order of events, I guess, but I'm assuming the lymphatic massage therapist was able to clear out areas closer to the trunk before he or she moved further away from the trunk, which are two of those key components we know are needed for effective and efficient lymphatic system work. So their massage therapist, of course, performed the most wonderful lymphatic massage using all of those lymphatic system principles that we just learned. Even if my sister felt like they were doing nothing, that means that she or he effectively targeted their lymphatic systems. So let's talk about why their massage therapists were right and what most girls get wrong. And I really want to drive this point home. The lymphatic system needs clearance closer to the trunk before further away from the trunk, and we need to use light pressure. Two key components that I see so many people miss. Most people I see use firmer pressure and they work on clearing swelling in a certain area without thinking about clearing the areas further up the chain and the lymph nodes in the areas that fluid in your foot or in your hands will eventually drain into. So take gua sha, for example. Whenever I see a gua sha video, I often see people starting at the face and doing certain patterns along the jawline, when in reality, there is a very specific pattern that needs to happen in order to effectively decrease that puffiness in your face. First, you have to awaken or clear out some of the lymph nodes in the trunk and neck so that eventually when that swelling starts to go down, that puffiness starts to go down, that fluid starts to move out of the face, it can drain into those different checkpoints and clear those effectively before moving back into your circulatory system. So that's something I don't always see is people opening up those areas, clearing out those areas before actually gua shaing your face. That is a must if you're going to effectively clear out some of the swelling and puffiness in your face when you do gua sha. The second thing, of course, is that they use way too heavy pressure. They use it more as a massage device versus a lymphatic device. And that's okay if that's your goal, to work some of those muscles of chewing, those muscles of mastication, headache muscles. If it's totally fine to do that. But I think there needs to be a clear distinction on why you are doing a certain technique and why you're using a certain amount of pressure when you are gua sha. If your goal is to affect the muscles, then heavier pressure is okay. But if you're actually trying to decrease that puffiness and decrease that swelling, you need to use light pressure, even with a gua sha device, after clearing those areas that the lymphatic system of your face eventually drains into. So light pressure and clearing out the areas close to the heart and close to the trunk are key in actually addressing and working on your lymphatic system and some of that puffiness and swelling that you feel. And anyone who is promoting lymphatic-based treatments and you don't see them do these things, or you see them use heavy pressure and not clearing certain areas, you can say that's a little bit of a red flag in how that person is approaching their lymphatic system and maybe the knowledge that they have on the lymphatic system. And we always approach it with kindness, of course, but we can also approach it with a little bit of a critical lens to know, oh, hang on, maybe they are not the person I want to go for lymphatic advice, because clearly they don't understand the specifics of the lymphatic system like you now do. So how can you actually affect your lymphatic system? We talked about how it's a low pressure system. Our circulatory system, our cardiovascular system has a pump. It has our heart. So not only does our heart help to pump fluid throughout that system, but we also use exercise, and we have one-way valves in that system so that when blood is actually getting pumped back to the heart, it's not necessarily flushing back down into our foot. We have those one-way valves that can help. So that's our circulatory system. What can we do about our lymphatic system, which is a little different in that it's a lower pressure system? Two key things: hydration, of course, and exercise. Those are the two easiest ways. Pumping our muscles through exercise actually helps not only our circulatory system, but also our lymphatic system. And then, of course, staying hydrated is a huge benefit to our lymphatic system. The other thing we can do is a self-lymphatic massage, with the keys being light pressure, clear areas close to the trunk before further away. You guys are going to get so irritated hearing me say this, but it's so important. We want to clear those areas first so that fluid's not getting stuck in our extremities, in our puffy, swollen fingers with rings, in our lower legs when we come off of a flight. We want to clear those areas closer to the heart, closer to the trunk, before we work on the swelling and puffiness and heaviness further away from the trunk. So a general rule of thumb as far as how to perform a self-lymphatic massage: you want to start off with deep diaphragmatic breaths. This really helps some of those lymphatic vessels, those lymph nodes inside the trunk that are often deeper than what we can actually reach. Then we want to use light pressure, circular sort of flicking motions at the neck. So we are clearing some of those lymph nodes that will eventually drain back into the heart. Then we move to the armpits and the groin, which are sort of those entry regions for the upper extremities and our lower extremities. The lymph fluid from our face drains into our neck. The lymph fluid from our arms drains into those armpits, and the lymph fluid from our legs drains into the groin. So we want to make sure to start at the trunk and then work our way out. And don't worry, I'm putting the full self-lymphatic massage videos in this week's newsletter. The right sequencing, the right pressure, the technique I actually teach my patients in this week's Smart Girl newspaper. The link to sign up is below. They come out every Wednesday. So if you're listening to this episode on the Monday it's released, sign up for that newspaper and it will send straight to your inbox. If you're listening to this after the fact, don't worry. We have all of those Smart Girl newspapers archived. So you can just click the link and see the Smart Girl newspaper associated with this episode, which I believe will be Smart Girl newspaper volume 19. And you could just scroll through to get the full videos for how to actually do a self-lymphatic massage for your face and for your entire body. As a side note, if you think you have challenges to your lymphatic system, if you're like, okay, but I feel like this is not normal, something's off, that totally could be the case. And there are actual specialists and experts that help with this. A lot of the time, our lymphatic systems are super affected if someone's undergoing cancer treatment. I see a lot of patients post-mastectomy. That's probably the most common for lymphatic work. And there are true lymphatic specialists. If you think you have a lymphatic system that is just not functioning, or you've had treatment for something that might have harmed or affected your lymphatic system in some way, there are experts out there. And if you know someone who's struggling with this, who's like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way after, this treatment or after this round of antibiotics or whatever it is, let them know that there are people who are actually specialized to help. There's healthcare professionals out there, lymphatic specialists, certified lymphedema specialists. There are people who solely work with these patients and know the compression garments, how to size them, all sorts of things. So I wanted to throw that in there. I feel like it would be remiss if I did not mention the additional professional help that someone could get for their lymphatic system if it is something that seems to be way outside of the norm, or if possibly their physician or surgeon didn't recommend it after some sort of cancer treatment. I also wanted to talk about vibration plates. I did an episode last week on the science behind vibration plates, how they affect our bone mineral density, our muscle strength, our power, our body composition, our fat loss, our muscle growth, all of those sorts of things. But I didn't mention how it affects our lymphatic systems. I feel like most people use vibration plates for the goals that I talked about last week, that bone mineral density, strength, power, fat loss. So I covered all of that last week. It's just the episode right before this if you want to listen to it. But we did not touch on the lymphatic system for the reason that I knew we would be covering it this week. So how might vibration plates actually help or harm your lymphatic system? We learned last week that vibration plates actually help strengthen your muscles more than no exercise at all. There are, of course, ways that exercise helps over vibration plates too, but if you are someone who doesn't exercise, a vibration plate will help your strength more than no exercise at all. Since the vibration plates have been shown to help strength in some way, we can know that there's muscle activation, of course, from these vibration plates. Since muscle activation helps our lymphatic system pump some of that lymph fluid throughout our lymphatic systems, that's how those vibration plates actually help our lymphatic systems. If we go back to the basics, muscle activation is super good for our lymphatic system. It's a low pressure system. It thrives on muscle activation to help pump some of that lymph fluid back up the system. A vibration plate allows for muscle activation, which can help your lymphatic system. But exercise, if you can exercise, if you have that good exercise routine and that habit built, also allows for muscle activation, which helps your lymphatic system. So you don't necessarily need a vibration plate to help your lymphatic system. Just staying hydrated, normal exercise, and self-lymphatic massages can do the trick. Now for a little fun. Why might we as girls feel a little puffier during certain phases of our cycle? Specifically, most of us feel puffier during our luteal phase. Your lymphatic system is actually influenced by your hormones. You're like, shocker, Kelsy, tell me something I don't know. My hormones influence everything. And with that, you're right. Hormones are a way our body communicates with different parts of our body. So, of course, our lymphatic system is affected by our hormones. Estrogen tends to actually support lymphatic function, which is why we might not feel as puffy during that first half, our follicular phase of our cycles. But as you move into that luteal phase, your hormones start to shift. Your body is more prone to fluid retention, so your lymphatic system has more to manage. And that's when you might feel a little bit more swollen or a little bit heavier. A little over a year ago, we chatted with Dr. Katie Hirsch, who is a PhD researcher on all things female physiology. And she mentioned a protocol that I've been following now for over a year. Ever since she mentioned it, I've been following this protocol every menstrual cycle, where she called it creatine loading, where during that luteal phase, that back half of your cycle, you take 5 days worth of 20 grams of creatine split amongst 4 doses. So you're not taking 20 grams of creatine at once on one day. I'm taking 5 grams 4 times a day for 5 days in my luteal phase. And what this does is this pulls some of the fluid more intramuscularly versus extracellularly. So you feel more powerful, you recover a little bit better. There's some performance benefits to this creatine loading, but you also feel less puffy because that water is getting pulled into the muscles versus staying out extracellularly and affecting some of that puffy, swelly, lymphatic-y system type of symptoms. So I'll link that episode below if you want to check out the full thing. She explains it so much better, but I have noticed a difference in not only my workouts doing the creatine loading, but also in that general puffiness and swelling and like just blahness that I feel within my body in that back half of my cycle in that luteal phase. So that's the lymphatic system. I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope you now understand a little bit better why you might feel puffy or more swelling during certain times of your cycle, certain times of the day, during flying, after a super salty meal. All of those things are affected by your lymphatic system. And now you have a greater understanding of that system and can also point out some red flags in how people are approaching their lymphatic system treatments. We've covered the lymphatic system before, so I'll link those episodes below if you want to dive in a little deeper. I'll also link Dr. Katie's episode, and then I will have the link to our Smart Girl newspaper below. If you're able to sign up before it comes out and get it sent straight to your inbox this Wednesday, or if you're a little later in listening to this episode and visiting us after the fact, you can always go into the archive. It'll be volume 19 of the Smart Girl newspaper. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys again on the next episode of Wellness Big Sister Pod, where we will continue our spring cleaning series.